Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is your fan favorite, Professor Hamamoto, on August 23rd, year 2026, at 4 p.m. PDT. Welcome, one and all, for what promises to be a marvelous talk on a not so obscure topic. In fact, it's hidden in plain sight. And this I am alluding to as the preppy, quote unquote, preppy counter revolution that commenced roughly around the 1980s and continues to the present day. And I am predicting, as part of my cultural forensics level of expertise, a revival in neo preppy, not neoconservative, because it's going to involve people who don't identify politically necessarily as quote unquote conservative, but a neo preppy revival in the culture, in the society, and importantly, in the economic system, the financial system, specifically where it deals with so called private equity companies such as BlackRock, such as State Street, associated with such figures as Larry Fink and the rest of them, right? The people who Trump, too, has surrounded himself with, those people. So, what does the preppy counter revolution of the 1980s and preppy as a concept in general, what does it have to do with private equity? What does it have to do with Wall Street? It has everything to do with it. Not that I'm trying to reduce cultural expression and style, fashion to mere economics, because it can't be reduced to dollars and cents. I think this is what the Wall Streeters miss. Wall Streeters, I'm using interchangeably with the private equity pirates. Yes, they are pirates. And by the way, most of you realize this, you haven't been able to put your finger on it yet, but these private equity firms on Wall Street are responsible not just for the debasement of clothing, the very garments we wear, but our food, pharmaceutical industry, housing, automobiles, the material culture, in addition to the spiritual impoverishment that we are experiencing today in 2026. And let me take this moment to thank those people who turned out in large numbers to see the live stream on the Sean Atwood show. I didn't check today, but late yesterday, I think it was verging on something like 30,000 views in less than 24 hours. And that's pretty good for me, someone who has been banished to the outskirts of Tubu land in favor of imposters and even intelligence operatives like Professor Jang. I keep bringing his name up here because you're going to see more yellow. I'm not even calling them yellows. These are like either Chinese, maybe South Korean, Filipino agents who are being and Indian, very important Indian agents, South Asians, who are going to be brought into the YouTube land posing as academics in order to blunt the strength of my critique of my what I call cultural forensics approach to understanding the larger society. And today we're going to be attempting to understand this complex that I have conveniently lumped under the umbrella term preppy. And toward that end, this is going to be a little bit about the methodology of today. And I know from the comments that I get from week to week on this channel and on the Sean Atwood channel that some of you do not like to hear a yellow man talking about himself. I mean, they go out of the people in the comment room, not a lot of them. There's a few, most of them people appreciate, enjoy, and recognize what I'm doing as being valuable and very important. Thank you. I'm not talking to you. I'm addressing the numbnuts who don't mind if a black man goes up and starts glazing himself. Yeah, I'm Pimp Daddy. Yeah, I'm all that. Or a Jew talks about, yeah, I'm Jewish, man, and we need a homeland. Or an Irish, oh yeah, St. Patrick's Day, yeah, everybody's Irish. Or a Sicilian, great. Be proud of who you are and your history. By the way, one of my favorite shows is the Michael Franzen Daisy show. He doesn't pronounce it. I give it the Italian pronunciation. It's really great, but he's talking about him as being a Italian American, or more specifically, Sicilian American, and that's good. And so I don't know what you people. I think, and that's partly why I wear this, because to fulfill your Orientalist expectations from being weaned on Jewish Hollywood, where the Oriental man is just a laughing stock. If he's a visible at all, he's a joke. He's the guy that serves you your Chinese food on the Sabbath. Or he's one of your techies, He's an assistant to the real brains of the operations, like in Silicon Valley or on Wall Street. He's a numbers guy. Or she. The she is usually a whore. She's usually married to Larry Ellison of Oracle. She's a Chinese concubine. All these guys, Bill Gates, I'm sorry, Zuckerberg himself, he's got himself a yellow woman. They know where the world economy is going, so they need to get some of that yellow pussy. All right. And I'll be talking about yellow pussy in a moment, okay? Because we're talking about Preppy. And that also includes the wannabe Preppies, and that includes the yellers. Because if you haven't noticed lately, they're way overrepresented in all these expectant preppy institutions, like the prep schools, Groton or whatever it might be, right? As an elevator to the Ivy League colleges and universities, or at least an elite private school, which could even include places like Pomona College, where I was reminded the other, Chris Christopherson went to Pomona College. That is an intelligence little node there in California. Chris Christopherson is not a country boy. He's from Marin County, right? Just like Winona Judd. Remember I was talking about yesterday on the Sean Atwood show about the New South, about how it is the new strategic node of the American entertainment industry. And by the way, I was exaggerating that there's no movies or TV shows made in Hollywood or LA, right? There still are, but nothing like what was happening during its golden age, right? Those days are over. In fact, there's more, I think, feature film, the blockbuster films, more films today made in the UK, places like Ireland, or not so much in London because it requires a lot of permitting and tourism that you have to deal with. But a lot of film production has moved to Britain, to the UK in general, as well as other parts of the world. So if that happens to bother you, that I overstate the facts, that's part of my pedagogy, just to get you to think outside of the patterns that all the pop-up pundits have you schooled in. So talking about LA, all the desk jockeys who probably even have never been to the US or Southern California, or they think the United States in general is just one giant Los Angeles, as they like to say. It's not. All right. And my role, my function here, I think a large part of it has to do with giving you the more specific inside lowdown of what America really is, at least from the perspective of the yeller man. And you might automatically think, well, what authority do you have? Do you have any standing in even commenting on this? You are new to the Americas, to the United States, American history, right? I'm not really so new. I'm like third, fourth generation American citizens. Both of my grandparents were U.S. citizens in Hawaii, in a territory albeit a colony of the U.S., but they're U.S. citizens. My parents, of course, were born here, all my siblings. So on that level, I'm there. But on a civilizational level, as I was getting prepared for this talk today, I was reading through this. Many of you probably have nightmares remembering about how your English classes forced you an encounter with John Milton or Paradise Lost. Or maybe you were an English major, so congratulations. But you had to struggle through it because it's a vastly different language. The mechanics are quite different. But I'm just bringing it up because he was born in 1608. He's an Elizabethan. I'm talking about Elizabeth I, not number 2. Okay. Remember John D? Yeah, everybody knows about John D and 007 because you're all Joe Rogan fans and Theo Vaughn and all the other pop-up pundits. So you can talk all day about John D. But Milton was a spy as well. He died at age 26, 27, something with a knife, a dagger stuck in his head through his eye because he was a spy. In addition to being the consummate craftsperson of modern English poetry and prose. And he was a revolutionary. Don't forget, most of these people that you had to slog through in your language classes or English or whatever they called it in your K through 12 had to take a literature survey and freshman English if you went to college. All that part of it, the politics of it has been stripped away. It's been denuded of its revolutionary power and force purposely. Right? And the teachers don't know anything. They come from the school of education, and by now all they're teaching about is lesbianism and transgender and racial identity, which is going to form a great deal implicitly of today's talk. Racial identity. I'm talking about Preppy. When I talk about Preppy, you're thinking white. You're thinking WASP, which stands for, anyway, I'll leave Milton behind. Anyway, I forgot to finish my thought. He was talking about cafe. He was talking about the English imagination of the Orient already in his early literature in the Elizabethan period. A real transformative moment in the English language civilization, including what later became the British Empire. All right, because what was the British Empire trying to do when they were, and along with their competing empires, the Portuguese, the Spanish people, the Dutch, they were trying to get the hell over to China and India. They're getting over to my people's world because they knew that's where the action was. And the reason why I'm leaving with this is because by the end of today's talk, we're going to return in my discussion of the concept of Preppy, we're going to bring it full circle and go back to East Asia or Asia in general. Because most of what when I say we, I'm talking about me as a boomer who grew up with clothes, merchandise, appliances, automobiles, shoes, sporting goods, gloves, baseball bats, baseballs, you name it. They all bore a common signature. And that signature read, "Made in USA." Right? But I'm not going to simply wax nostalgic today back to the 1950s glory days of American global imperial and economic supremacy. No, I'm taking it down to 2026, and I'm not going to argue that we're going to go back to that golden age as Donald Trump was promising, but moving forward into the 21st century, but with a new perspective, a new aesthetic, a new understanding of the world system, which also includes the yellow world and the world of Latin America and Africa south of the Sahara, the Arab world as well, the world of Islam, all of it. Right, that's a pretty big agenda there. I'm not going to cover it all, but I'm just going to simply focus on one tiny aspect of it called the preppy culture. Preppy, of course, most of you know, but I should take 10 seconds to explain what that means. That's just a shorthand for prep school, preparatory school. That is preparation for Yale or Harvard or Brown University, the Ivy League, in other words. But it's more expanded to include other more exclusive, not strictly speaking, Ivy League schools, like Pomona College, like even Stanford. It's not Ivy League, but it's ranked up there these days. So it's just kind of again, another term of convenience. That is what preppy means. And what it connotes and what it implies, and it can be measured, and the sociologists have tried to measure it empirically about their class identification, their connection to other illustrious families or wannabe people who are rising through the ranks. We'll talk about them. We're going to talk about Ralph Lipschitz in specific. You know who Ralph Lipschitz is? Well, you'll learn in a moment. Right? There will be no Ralph Lipschitz amongst yellow people, because Ralph Lipschitz, if you looked him on the street, you would say, okay, that guy's preppy. He's white. Right? But if you saw a yellow person walking on the street rocking the preppy clothes, you're going to go, wow, what's up with that? And speaking of the yellow man walking down the street rocking the preppy clothes, for you, ladies and gentlemen, because I know some of you just hate the yellow man talking about himself. Jewish man, yes, hey, I'm Jewish. Here's some Yiddish terms for you to chew on. Macher, schlep, blah, blah. Okay. Or I'm Mr. Badass black lady. You've seen those crash out videos of black women at Kmart. They like to announce their whole ethnic, racial identity. If something pisses them off while they're standing at the checkout line at Costco, they say, hey, I am a 37-year-old black woman, blah, blah, blah. And then some security guard comes down and throws her on the floor and cuffs her. All right. So I know you're not used to that. So just to irritate you, and you're up there with the nitpickers, because some of you are going to say, well, yeah, Rishi Sunak was actually the prime minister of, well, in your accent, of the UK. He wasn't the mayor of London. I'm rapping, okay? You're missing the whole point, right? So you can nitpick all you want, but I just recognize that you're not, that doesn't make you smart, doesn't make you intelligent, doesn't make you have one up on the professor here. Okay, all it means is you're a nitpicker. And I know it's a sport for some of you people with ADHD, or you Wikipedia specialists who look up material after I speak, because you can't believe that I can lay down this type of information like on the tip of my tongue like this. You can't believe that the yellow man can spit the way he do. So you have that luxury. But anyway, to irritate this particular narrow part of the audience, which is still hanging off the balls of Professor Jiang, because that's what the intelligence agencies have put out there so that my truth can't get out. Just to irritate you, I'm going to stage a mini fashion show for you today, here and now. All right, mini. It's not going to be the full blown. I'm not going to put on the clothes. I'm not going to walk down the little extension into the audience and have Anna Wintour in her oversized glasses taking notes, and with the paparazzi flashing on Porzikova or Nazimova or some Eastern European model / escort, right? I'm not going to do that. All right. This is what I will do for you to talk about preppy style. I will share with you just some select pieces from my own closet. Right. This is a cardigan. It's 100% cotton. And very importantly, it says made in USA. This is not made in China, not made in Vietnam, not made in Malaysia. These are all countries that are coming now to prominence in copying or manufacturing simulations of the preppy lifestyle, the preppy American lifestyle. And here, and the main reason I'm showing this is not because it's made in the US, it's because of the crest here, the insignia. You can't see it, but it's the insignia of Brown University. Okay, that's about as Ivy League and preppy as you can get. Built, by the way, just so you know that I know, built on the literal labor of African slaves, African American slaves. All right. I'm just acknowledging that because I know that's part of the humiliation ritual that white people these days, or white adjacent people like me, I'm using that ironically, are supposed to recognize that the woman who's being beat down in Costco is a 35-year-old black woman, and you cannot talk to me that way. All right. I watched those crash out videos. I think those are being manufactured. Just an aside, I think someone is staging those and putting them on X just to create and exacerbate racial tensions in America, which we're going to be talking about today implicitly when talking about preppy culture and a WASP culture. So here's Brown. This sweater here happens to have come from the closet of an ex-girlfriend of mine way back when, because she went to Brown. Okay, this is part of the preppy story. She was the daughter of yellow people, engineers. They came in large numbers to America in the 1960s. Up to 1965, the immigration laws prohibited Orientals, that includes East Asians, from coming into America. There was a quota, there was a cap on it. But then congressional legislation threw that over. Anyway, her family was part of that early wave of renewal of yellow or Asian immigration to America. My people came before 1924 when the door was shut. That's why I've been here so long as a yeller man. Historically connected, but legislatively there was a big rupture, a severing of that connection between Asia and America, which I studied, by the way. That was one of my areas of expertise as a academic professional. All right. And that's one of the reasons why she liked me, because she went to Brown and she's from Palo Alto. That's where Stanford is, by the way. In fact, from her house, her parents were well off. See, my people who came in early were the laborers, they're working class people largely. Right. My grandparents never went to college. They never probably went past 8th grade. I don't think they ever even learned how to speak English, right? They were like really immigrant people. Her parents came already locked and loaded because they were from the educated, trained, pre-adapted class from China. And a lot of them came from Taiwan recently, more, around the same time after the 65. So that's how she was able to live in Palo Alto. That's a high wealth zip code, in case you don't know. If you're talking about Stanford University, you're talking about, that's the middle of Silicon Valley. There's a lot of wealth there, but she grew up in that milieu. There's that word again. So her parents, unlike my parents, who sent me to State University, which I'm proud of, by the way, because I'm ghetto. Her parents knew better because they were overseas educated immigrants, and they knew that all their kids had to go to Ivy. And so, against her will, they sent her all the way from Northern California, Bay Area, where there's lots of yellers, to cold Providence, Rhode Island in the Northeast. She was so isolated up there. And she was so isolated, she even, in a fit of protest, dropped out of the curriculum and made up her own. And you know what it was called? It's called Asian American Studies. She crafted her own major, got her own degree. And the same, by the way, she was in a program there that was a combination of undergraduate and pre-med. So after that, she was guaranteed admission to the Brown Medical School. So she went on to get her medical degree and is a doctor now. I don't know where she's practicing or malpracticing in her case, which is probably more likely. But she made it, because of her parents have that orientation that the Preppy families just took for granted. So that's not my world. And I think one of the reasons why she found me appealing is because I was so ghetto. I'm the bad boy. Because she was always dating these gangsters in San Francisco, because Palo Alto is south of San Francisco. It's outside. It's a suburb. But she was always dating the bad boys from Chinatown, all the Chinatown gangsters. So, and by the way, that seems to be not uncommon. I won't say it's common, but it's not uncommon for the women of a high class. They'll go slumming, man, and they want to get with the ghetto boy. Right? They could be black, they could be Latino, or they can be like me. Okay, that's one story that I'm telling, a personal story that I'm sharing with you so far as Preppy culture is concerned. And she dressed that way too. It was not her, it was not an affectation just from living up in the Northeast. She just wore what everybody else wore. She shopped at LL Bean, not the catalog. She would drive down there because that's where the headquarters. I've been there, by the way. It's out. You go to Boston, you have to drive up north. Retail. So I think it's open 24 hours. I think it's still there. I haven't been there for years, but and by the way, I should mention. I hasten to add, this is very important. LL Bean is not the LL Bean that I grew up with, that earlier preppies grew up with, right? Joseph Bank is not the same. Brooks Brothers not the same. And this is where again the Asian connection comes in. All their merchandise has been offshored to the Asian countries. And guess what? The Asian manufacturing oligarchs and business people and finance people in Singapore, and now more recently in China or in Hong Kong, definitely, they have money. And they have the preppy American dream imagination imprinted in their mind. They have the images of their children going to Harvard University. By the way, the oligarchs of the Communist Party of China, they all send their children to Harvard University to get their degrees there. In fact, one of the valedictorian, is it valedictorian? Yeah, I guess she was the top speaker for the Harvard. And again, you can pick me down and say, oh, she wasn't valedictorian, she was salutatorian. But, screw you. Stick to the point here. She was a Chinese national. It's on YouTube, and people really rebelled because she was very insulting and condescending to all the WASP people in the audience. Now, she didn't say that our people, the Chinese, the red Chinese, are going to take over the world and rule over the white people and turn you into coolies, just like you did to us for our 200 years of humiliation, smoking your British East Asian opium with your cartels. By the way, a lot of the wealth of Harvard University, Yale, and Brown, as I told you, it's traceable to the great opium trading family, the great Yankee families of that period. So it's kind of ironic that the descendants of those people who made war and eventually kicked out those merchants and made their own country. It's called China. There's the Republic of China, and there's the People's Republic of China, and then there's Hong Kong, which is kind of treading lightly between, you know what I get. And there's Malaysia, there's Singapore. I've been up to all these places. I got to see that I have, to me, it's my job. It is my profession. It's not my hobby to be on site to see these global transformations take place. Well, I haven't been all places of Asia, but I've been to quite a bit of it. But But that being said, I don't pass myself off as an expert in any of these areas, but I have some basic grasp and direct shoe leather experience with this phenomenon that I'm talking about. So yeah, they're all there up as part of the Preppy experience. I want to clarify that at the outset of this talk, so you don't think that I'm just talking about quote unquote white people or WASPs. The Preppy experience today in 2026 is very yellow. And I'm seeing that it's already becoming more brown, that is more Latino, or at least white Latino or whitino, right? It took a while for Jews to be accepted into the Ivy League, to the point where they even had to make their own university because they were excluded from Harvard and Yale. And before that, Irish Americans were not necessarily excluded from admission, but they weren't brought into the club. They weren't clubbable, right? Joseph P. Kennedy's always written about in that vein. He was just trying to pay back all the WASPs that excluded him from the Harvard eating clubs because he was Roman Catholic. So he wanted to be president, and his son wanted he got killed. So they had JFK, and then we have our, that's kind of a simplification, but that was part of his struggle. So this is a common pattern in American society. But one of the strategies that's not even conscious, one of the uniform, I think, of the Eastern, Northeastern political, economic, and importantly, the cultural establishment is the Preppy outfit. It's the clothes, right? I've already mentioned Brook Brothers, and if you don't know who that is, check it out on your own for the YouTube histories. YouTube is good for something. They have some pretty decent documentaries on these people. Or some companies, heritage companies, they're called in marketing, that are still hanging on. In fact, I'll talk about one right now. See, where is it? Yeah. Here's a heritage company. I have a whole collection of these shoes. It's not like I collect them, I wear them, right? But I didn't bring them indoors because they're all dirty. They're outside. Since I am of Japanese extraction, we don't wear shoes inside the house because that's for the outside. That's dirt, right? So I abide by that practice. If you come visit me, you can take shoes off. Okay. Don't worry. I have little slippers for you. Okay. If you're, and hopefully you've washed your feet lately. But anyway, since I am Oriental, we bathe regularly. Okay. That stereotype is true because it's very humid there. But I keep up the hat. Here's a shoe company. I bought these recently, and I haven't put the laces on there, and I just thought I'd show it off. This is part of my American Heritage collection. It's by a company named Quaddy. I'm not getting any money from them. I paid for these full retail. I got them on sale, but didn't get a deal on it to promote it on this channel. I just want to clarify. I got them because I liked the description and I read the reviews, and I said, this fits my aesthetic, my personal style. It's made in America, very, very important. And I know it's going to be a certain minimum level of quality. Something like this, if it was made in China or Pakistan, it's going to be a piece of garbage. It's going to be all glued together. Shoes should not be made out of glue. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can have a little bit of gum rubber here, but you can see even the gum. Well, maybe you can't see even the gum rubber. So this is real gum rubber, not the synthetic stuff. Real gum rubber, and it's got the little insignia Vibram, made in USA. To sort of, maybe it's counterfeit. I don't think it is, but it's stitched in to the shoe, and this is a mock, short for moccasin, right? Because the Preppy style is, guess what? It's a large of it is adaptation to native clothing styles, which is the moccasin. The moccasin was they were these specifics, but they wore the Indians I'm talking about, wore this style. They made them themselves, obviously, but they were the ones who crafted these shoes, and the pioneers, the people, the people who colonized the areas, hey, that's really good. I'm going to adapt it to our culture. And it became part of the preppy look. The mock toe shoe, the boat shoe has a similar I'm not going to get too into the fine points because I'm not an expert on shoemaking or in clothing or haberdashery anyway. I know a little bit about it, but I only know it from the perspective of cultural forensics to the point where I view this as being useful, valuable, marketable, even cultural information and political information, because we'll talk about the economics of this. You know, I got these because I'm in fear that Quadi will one day, they're probably already circling them like vultures, that they'll be bought out by a so-called private equity company and the whole quality will go right into the crapper, just like everything else in American society has gone into the crapper. And there's this writer, I first knew him as a science fiction writer, but he's a really good social observer and essayist. His name's Cory Doctorow. He wrote a short book and he's written articles. You can look it up yourself, articulating his concept of inshitification, just why everything in America has gone to shit. And he refers to this process as inshitification. And it is a process. It is a slow downward slide consciously that's being orchestrated by Wall Street, the City of London, the big boys, to make sure that it won't be long before we're living with is of any sort of quality, including the very food that we eat. Right? So when I buy shoes like this or invest in clothes that you're going to see some pieces, select pieces, it's a statement about who I am, what I value, my personal aesthetic. Also, comfort is an issue, wearability, how it launders, how it feels, the drape, all of it. Everything gay that you look to when you're buying clothes, at least me, you know, that's what I value, and I'll pay for it. And the good news, I should tell you at the outset, the good news is that there's a revival of this. There's a response to the inshitification process going on in America right now. And that's what today's show, for the most part, is about. And I'm not just talking about these people who are the conservative talk shows and the nattering nabobs of negativity and the pop-up pundit. Oh, America's going on to blah, 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 blah. No. I'm not going to let that happen. And you're not either. We Americans, we don't play that. All right? See those instruments behind you? They went through an inshitification process too. Everything, automobiles, I mean, there's hardly any American-made automobiles today on the road unless they're people who are fanciers and they nerd out on mechanics. We need to encourage those types, including the lowriders, right? The lowriders are a national treasure, and they're mostly Mexicans, Mexican Americans. There are a lot of Japanese, because we grew up amongst the Mexicans because we weren't allowed to live amongst the white people. So there's a lot of Japanese people, Japanese descent, like me, who are into the lowrider culture, automobiles, American-made, and Japanese automobiles, because we as communities recognize quality and we see this as a cultural expression of who we are as a people. So first of all, I'm talking about everybody in America, we have to regain the pride that's been slowly stripped from us consciously by the New York Slimes, by the Washington Compost, by the legacy networks, by even now the infiltrated indie media talking about what a wretched, ugly, despicable nationality we are. And by the way, that's also going on in the UK. I've observed it firsthand. Any advanced society, Japan is so far has been able to repulse that. They've been able to see through the bullshit. And we'll get to that at the end of the show here. because a lot of these fashions and the handcrafting and merchandise, guess where it's being Americana. Guess where it's being practiced most assiduously and religiously and with devotion of Japanese traditional craftsmanship? Yes, Japan. So it's come full circle. And ironically, their first exposure to Americana, I'm talking about clothes, but it also includes music, including country music. A lot of American servicemen were over there from the South, and they played their music. A lot of Japanese people got into bluegrass and country music, Hawaiian music, all of it, okay? They could recognize we've lost sight of it. We who are living and growing up here in the shadow of Larry Fink and the private equity companies like State Street and BlackRock and Blackstone and Sinister Incorporated. We haven't seen that slow slide, but people outside of the United States have, and they've studied it. When I say studied it, I mean they will come to the US and they have their little pads there and they have their little cameras. You think they're just little silly, funny looking tourists. No, man, they're studying. They're taking photos, right? They're seeing what's going on in the street. They're listening to the sounds coming out of the underground hip hop clubs of the downtown, the loft scene of the 1980s. And they're going into the old used record stores and buying tons and tons of used vinyl. And they're also buying this is back in the 80s, buying all the used Levi's and shipping back to Japan for profit, for money, because they valued it, not because it was American, because it was good quality and they weren't making it there. They are now. I'm getting ahead of myself, but now today, Japanese denim made from scratch in their own mills is regarded the world over, not just by nerds, but by ordinary consumers as the best in the world. Not America, because as most of you know, American Levi brands and the Wrangler, all the brands that people of my age grew up on, they offshored a long time ago. They kept the label and the mystique, but they left the rest behind. They farmed it out to China and more recently South Asian and Southeast Asian countries, right? So that was, in a nutshell, the decline of the Preppy. But here's one of my shoes. It's a moccasin style, and it's going to last me years and years. And if the soles ever wear out, I'll be able to take them to a cobbler, a shoe repairman, and he'll put a new sole on. He'll re-sole it, right? For us, growing up in the baby boom period of the 50s, resoling our shoes was not so unusual. Today, they just throw them away. We throw away our clothes. You've heard about fast fashion. You know about the garbage dumps that are full of polyester garbage. By the way, the reaction to that is one of the reasons why Forever 21 went bankrupt. It was started by Korean immigrants who said, hey, we're going to set ourselves up at the garment district of Los Angeles and buy crap clothes, and the styles, especially if women's clothes, it changes every 2 weeks, and we're going to run them to our stores, sell it dirt cheap. And he was able to make a ton of money then, and they went into retail. And I think a private equity company bought their ass, and then boom, they're gone. They used to be in all the malls. Most of you probably remember this. Anyway, let's go back a little historically and look at where the Preppy style came from, supposedly. And there's tons of material like this, so we're just going to see a little bit of it.
Preppy. This is what I know. It kind of, first of all, Preppy is from prep school. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep.
And then there was a book called the Official Preppy Handbook.
Yes.
And I think it came out, it was in around 1980. And I think it was like a huge bestseller, and it kind of lampooned the idea of wasp clothing for prep school kids. Am I
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
Yeah.
I think the funny thing is you're absolutely right. The intention of the book what was a lampoon.
Yeah.
But that's not really what happened. I remember my copy of the Preppy Handbook was so worn out
Dog
from
eared
just, oh my
everywhere.
goodness. We all really referred to that book like it was our Bible, which it's probably exactly what the author was making fun of in the
I never
first
read
place.
it.
It was really, really funny.
Was it illustrated or were there
There
photos
were
or?
drawings
Oh,
in it.
okay.
And there actually a second preppy handbook came out a couple of years ago, but it wasn't nearly as
Yeah.
good.
Well, and a couple of years ago, there was one called, it was called Ivy Style. I think it's all about like Ivy League schools and
Oh
that kind
yeah,
of look.
similar idea.
How would you define the preppy look?
Well, the preppy look is, it's blue blazers and webbed belts and red pants and no socks.
Yes.
That's sort of what the guys are wearing. And then the women are in Lily Pulitzer. You remember Lily Pulitzer? All those
Yes.
really colorful prints, cotton prints.
Made a comeback for Target, like I think a couple of years ago.
Yep. And also still have a very, very healthy business on the East Coast.
Aha.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Tory Burch more recently
Burch, of
really
course.
tapped into that with that kind of caftany
Yeah. Tunic
thing.
tops,
Tunic,
right?
absolutely. J. Crew.
I remember Lacoste shirts as a little kid. Those were like that was Nirvana. When you had, growing up in Toronto, when you had a friend who would go down to Florida and they'd bring back like multiple Lacoste shirts, it was like you had hit pay dirt.
It's an easy thing, I mean, you just throw one of those on, you look great. That brings me to why people are wearing what they're wearing in either preppy life or in the summer house. It's traditionally it was the activities of the summer house that really dictated what people were wearing, so people are sailing or they're playing tennis or they're
Right.
playing golf. And so the stuff they're wearing is all derived from that because they're not changing from that. There's a quote from the Preppy Handbook, which really illustrates that.
Hopefully you get the idea. I remember the preppy scare of the 1980. I remember when that book came out. I never bought a copy because I was already wearing preppy. I was a preppy without knowing that I was, and that today still is my style. I wear this to fulfill the Orientalist expectations of people who like to watch Professor Jang or some guy who can barely speak English commenting. I mean, that's your idea of what a yellow person in America is about. But I also wear it because it's a very nice, fine garment, and I'm wearing it because a lot of the construction, the dyes, and the inspiration did find its way into preppy clothes, even down to today. All right, so it has multiple meanings if you want to get beyond your Hollywood images, your comic book images. It's deep. Indigo, the dyes have been indigo. Where do you think that came from? Where do you think dyeing technology and cloth and textiles, where do you think that was most refined that the people in Elizabethan England were willing to travel the Atlantic Ocean and look for eastward passage down the Hudson River to get to China so they can get them textiles and those dyes and the plants, right? The herbs. Yeah, it was the Asian world that they were looking for. The East Asia, the British East Asia, the Dutch East Asia Company were exploring these lands uh, of my forefathers, the Yeller people, and the textiles, of course, right? Cottons as well. And Latin America. I'm talking about Asian specific, but Latin America, Pima cotton, Peru, all the great plantations down there, right? And this is concentrated, all that wealth of the world that was gathered through the city of London and Wall Street were in the hands of the people who gravitated toward the Northeast, who got to play tennis in the summer and had boats. They were heavily into boating culture. That's why they developed their Sperry topsetter shoes. The guy who developed it was himself a weekend sailor who wanted to find a shoe that he could use it that wouldn't slip around. So he developed that special patented. I have a pair downstairs. That's my everyday wear, by the way, my Sperry topsiders. But they're downstairs at the threshold and they're dirty. That's why I didn't bring them. But I'm just telling you, they have a little sole there that you can walk on a wet deck. Not that I ever do, right? But you won't slide. That was the whole con. Then it became part of the style. That's Sperry. They're still around. They have the American-made version, by the way, and they also have a Chinese-made version, which are pretty good. I have both. They're very similar in quality. And the gap is closing, by the way, right? Because some of you may not realize, but in the 1950s, whenever Japanese goods were entered the market here in the U.S., everybody just turned their nose up on it, including myself, because it was garbage. It was not really well made. It was just getting a foothold into this emerging market, which is now the dominant market. So don't think that China is going to be producing garbage forever, or Indonesia. They're all elevating their game to world standard, to what used to be American standards. All right, I'm just kind of giving you the preview here. So let's look at the female counterpart of the preppy culture, preppy style. By the way, I should say that this talk was inspired by this book, which I give 5 stars to. That's my highest recommendation. It's by a guy named Michael Knox Barron. I don't know what his ethnicity is. Knox, I assume he's from maybe Scottish background. Barron, I think he might be Jewish, partly, because there's a lot of hybridization going on in 2026. You got Jared Kushner and Ivana Trump. It's like the WASP boundaries that were quite strong in the 20s, 30s, 40s, even through the 50s and 60s, have almost disappeared in the case of certain other ethnic groups, primarily Jews. And there's a sign that barriers are also kind of lowering in the case of yellow people. And I had a first glance at the future when I visited a elite women's college, Wellesley, in central Massachusetts, where all the daughters of the wealthy bourgeoisie of American society, culture, and politics, that's where they send their daughters to get them educated so they can get married some Wall Street broker or some high-level attorney or someone who's going to go working in Washington, D.C. Wellesley, I gave a talk there. And it was specifically an audience of Asian American students. And by the way, it's a women's college, right? There are no men enrolled there unless they're gay. There's a few, but it's like, I won't give a percentage, but it's almost 100% yellow. But what I was expecting, women in little plaid skirts with oversized safety pins on, the preppy look. But they were yellow. But they were all dressed preppy style, North Central Massachusetts. They were going to it's called the Seven Sisters, Amherst College, Smith College. These are all the women's colleges that the Northeastern bourgeoisie, and down to New York as well, would send their kids in order to be amongst their own kind. And of course, by the same token, exclude others, including Jews. Definitely Orientals, not unless you are the daughter of an ambassador from China or some Asian guy from India. You'll be admitted there, right? Very, very clear-cut lines. That was part of the preppy ethos, if you can go that far. This is the 80s. And by the time the 80s came out, this woman, Lisa Barrack, I forgot her last name, she was starting to lampoon it and drawing objectivity to it, because she herself, she's Jewish, and she had already undergone this process of being absorbed into the ruling class, which once upon a time was monopolized by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, white people, in other words. By the way, this book, at the outset, questions the utility of this term WASP. right. And I agree with them. It's just sort of a shorthand, and it was developed, I think, as early as the 50s or 60s in the sociological literature. This is when the lifestyle, the political, economic prominence, the pull that these people who belong to Skull and Bones. This is when it first started being examined in academia by sociologists. Many of them were Jews, by the way, because they wanted to understand the power structure they were trying to either enter or align themselves with. So I read all this stuff, all these classic stories about the elite WASP society, and it was also preceded by literature. The most notable example being F. Scott Fitzgerald. He was from the Midwest. They called it the West back then, but we're really talking about the American Midwest. And went to Princeton. He got to hobnob with all the Ivy League people. I think he might have been Catholic too. So he was not completely within the mainstream. He was not just another white guy. That's the problem with white studies, by the way, is they lump all the different ethnic groups that are called white people into one giant trick bag, which is not accurate, because there's tensions between them, and there's also compatibility, and there's also non-white groups now in 2026 that are beginning to breach that once impenetrable wall. So anyway, this is a good book. It's written from more of a literary perspective. This guy's done his research. I didn't know who he was, honestly, but I see by his little bio there, he's written some pretty good books, it seems like, because I haven't read them yet, on the American establishment. That's the key word, the establishment. And I'm going to read them. He's written a book on the Kennedy. I want to see what he's at, because he's that good. And he's written for all the WASP magazines. When I say WASP, but they're not heavily Jewish. When I say WASP, it's their establishments, but properly called. Let's see. He's written for the New Yorker, which was my dream, the Wall Street Journal, which was my dream, the National Review, that's more conservative, which was my, I would take it. He lives in Westchester County, New York. That's about as WASP/Jewish as you can get. It's outside of New York. He can take the train in, and go to the clubs, whatever. He probably went to Columbia or something like that. I don't know. He went to Ivy. So anyway, I can recommend this book, but I did at the same time, I didn't want to go over this chapter, line, and verse of all the incredible insights that this author, Barron, has come up with. So I encourage you to read it on your own. Anyway, the point is that got me to thinking more broadly about the preppy culture. Used to be a subculture. Now it is a culture, and it's global in scope. So now let's turn to the female side of it. By the way, I think this is where cheerleader and song leader culture first arose in the girls' colleges, girls' schools, because they would cheer the athletic teams of the boys on the field. And now it's a global phenomenon. You go to a Taiwanese professional baseball game, where you can find them on YouTube, and there's these women dressed in American style cheerleading outfits, and they have their own take on it. Or Japanese baseball or sports, they have American style. They have contests, internet cheerleading and song leading is huge, and it comes out of this whole preppy milieu, I think, because it came out of college, came out of University of Michigan or University of California, Golden Bear, whatever school you went to that had a nationally known sports tradition, you're going to have the cheerleaders. George Bush, H.W. Bush, did you know he was a cheerleader at Yale? Yes, he was. And it wasn't seen as gay. Cheerleaders could be men back then, and they still are today. But anyway, here's the female version.
I'm Rebecca Chute, and I'm the author of Seven Sisters Style, the all-American preppy look. The Seven Sisters were a group of prestigious women's colleges: Barnard, Radcliffe, Bryn Mawr, Smith, Mount Holyoke, Vassar, and Wellesley. They were all founded to be the equivalent of Ivy League schools for men. What was amazing about the Seven Sisters is that the students weren't just getting this first-rate education, they were creating this campus culture that would ultimately transform American fashion and lay the foundations for preppy style. In the 1800s, it was very rare for a woman to be educated to this level, so students were using clothing as a way to create these new identities as athletes, as intellectuals, and as American college women. And by the 1930s, there were really two sides to this whole look. So on campus during the week, you really saw the casual side, so Bermuda shorts, jeans, button-downs, a lot of garments that were originally intended for men that the women adopted and adapted for a new look. But on the weekends, there was a transformation. Kid leather gloves, cashmere cardigans, dresses, and gowns. Students might go to a neighboring men's college for dates, proms, or parties, and soon the look became bigger than the colleges themselves. You could see the look in stores, in magazines. Whether you were a Seven Sister or even a college girl, you could buy the look. So I went to the archives at each of the colleges and pored over their collections of student guidebooks, diaries, old garments, photos, vintage fashion magazines, and designer archives. I'm really excited that there are photos here that haven't been seen for decades and might otherwise have been forgotten. I think today we know a lot more about the men's preppy style, how it started in the Ivy League and then moved into mainstream fashion, but the women's side was largely untold. So I think I really wanted to show how these groundbreaking women have influenced and inspired designers from Perry Ellis to Ralph Lauren and even the preppy game changers like Tom Brown. It's a timeless American tradition, and you see the Seven Sisters style on the runways today. Once, these clothes were just a tradition on campus, but now they're a worldwide phenomenon.
A worldwide phenomenon, to say the least, and I'm saying again, put your money on the neo-preppy revival. It's happening. The history is going to be brought to the fore, and it's going to enter into the mass circulation magazines, and then the mass manufacturers are going to get the wheels of production going, and we're going to see it all over the place until we're sick of it. And I mentioned the Seven Sisters, Wellesley College. I told you I have a talk there. And since some of you, a minority, don't like hearing stories told from the perspective of a yellow man talking about himself, right? They think I'm just full of ego and full of myself and can't stop glazing my own life history. Because of them, I'm not going to be telling you about my visit to Wellesley, and they had to get me out really quickly out of town, out of Wellesley, really quick, because they, meaning my host and the people around them, were afraid that I was going to be molested by a lecture hall full of horny Wellesley yeller women. I'm not exaggerating. I was wondering why it was like a military maneuver. They made sure I got there a day early, made sure that no one, the information didn't leak what motel or hotel I was staying at. And they made sure I was just escorted there by one of their own adult level faculty, and that I didn't mingle or fraternize with any students, didn't go eat or hang out with them. Usually you have a sort of informal talk with them or have coffee or dessert or something like that. But that was not part of it. And as soon as my talk was over, they put me in a car and they drove me back to Boston. And I said, well, what's going on here? Well, why the why the secrecy? See, I'm already telling a story about myself. So I'll just stop right there. But the horny undergraduate mythology is very true, especially when you're talking about the Seven Sisters, because it's all girls' school, and that's where they first learn about lesbianism. By the way, usually the rule of thumb is that you're a lesbian as an undergraduate, then you find some guy who's going to go to Wall Street, then you get married and you start a family, right? But until then, you could experiment, and you can wear men's khaki if you're a woman, wear men's khakis and flannel shirts, and wear sort of dykey clothes, and but with the expectation that you are going to wear the gown and the traditional wedding get up, made preferably by Vera Wang, who's a Yeller woman, married to a Jewish rag trade merchant, by the way, because this is leading up to where the Preppy revival came from. And it makes sense because they're the foundations of the garment trade, the manufacturing garment trade in the United States. I mean, I'm talking about Jewish immigrants, mostly from the shtetls of Central Europe. All right. You heard about the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. These are all immigrant women run by immigrant bosses chopping on cigar. No safety, no labor protection. This was the heyday of when labor unions started to come to the fore, which were mostly mobbed up. But the point is that they're the foundations of the business. But they wanted to leave that identity, right? Just like Neil Sedaka, whose father was a Sephardic Jew. His first language is Spanish. You might not know who he is. He was a very famous pop singer in the 50s and the 60s and even into the 70s. Songwriter with Howard Greenfield. Check him out if you don't know. If you don't know who Neil Sedaka is, shame on you. But anyway, people of his generation and the woman who later wrote the Preppy handbook were still outsiders to this particular world of WASP, political, economic, and cultural power. That began to change in the 50s, changed in the 60s. There was a whole literary movement of Jewish American novels, right? Philip Roth, Joseph Heller, you name it, all the little magazines, Partisan Review, they were reviewing their work, the New Yorker featuring their work. And they moved into these primary institutions. But they didn't want to bring in the whole Jewish rag trade image. It's low class. They wanted to leave that behind because that's not part of this image. This is that's the whole story of The Great Gatsby, isn't it? His name was J. Gatz. He anglicized it to Gatsby. He became a multi-millionaire living there on East Egg or wherever it was, looking at Daisy Buchanan through the spyglass, who was the embodiment of Shiksa beauty and aspiration. That's what F. Fitzgerald was writing about because he himself was alienated from the Midwest. I told you already. Okay. So there's a young man who went into the rag trade. In fact, he went to go work in a bastion of American WASP style called Brooks Brothers. And I don't think anything in their shop today, they still have retail stores in New York particularly, or maybe places like Newport Beach or the West Side, Beverly Hills, or parts of San Francisco where there's still some older patrician types. They might have retail, but their clothes are not made in America. They all used to be made in America. They're all good. They're really quality. And I have some examples of them somewhere. Maybe I wore them out because I always favored button-down Oxford shirts. And up until about 20 years ago, they were not a problem finding them. Now I can't find one. And if you want a business opportunity, I would suggest you find one of these abandoned textile mills down south, down in Greenville, South Carolina, where Hayden Panettiere's body was found. Revive one of them small textile manufacturers, set up shop there, get some tax rebates from the local government, and restart a shirt factory making Oxfords. And I'll be one of your best customers. 100% cotton button down with real buttons that don't break out of good plastic and strong American made threads and the right stitching with the box pleat, all the details, these matter because it's not done here anymore. Those types of shirts are made in Hong Kong. I bought them. I've been to Hong Kong. I went to visit the tailor and I says, wow, so this is where all the quality went. They'll make a suit for you. Maybe, I don't know about now. I haven't been there for years. They could make a suit for you like in 24 hours, and it's a pretty darn good one. I bought some really cheap. By the way, most of the tailors are either Cantonese, but a lot of them were Indians. And they were Indians because they were part of the larger British Raj system where they were learning. It was a colony of Britain. So they learned British tailoring and clothes making. And they were selling it in Hong Kong. I still get their email messages. They have these trunk shows coming to San Francisco. They have like two or three times a year. They'll bring clothes. They'll take a fitting. They'll bring some samples, and they'll measure you up and make you a shirt. And I've done that before. That's what I had to, because I couldn't find any in America. So here's a business opportunity for you, courtesy of Cultural Forensics. And if you think this is just a fantasy, let me just tell you right now, it's not. It's already happening. I told you it's on the way. I'll give you an example. If you'll let me take a pause before we get into the story of how the 1980s Preppy revival came to pass in the mass media and in the culture, in the movies, the magazines, the even the walkways, right? Here, ladies and gentlemen, is an example. This is from my closet. I just had to go. When I first learned about this company, it's based in San Francisco. I said, well, it's really expensive. If you're going to buy US made clothes, not about women, I'm talking about men's clothes, you're going to pay a premium because the labor costs are much higher here. And so are materials. But anyway, there's two entrepreneurs. I've kind of followed the growth of their company. They're based in San Francisco, by the way, not far from where I am. And they saw a niche developing for the reasons that I've already discussed in the area of denim, of what used to be. San Francisco was the home base of Levi's, by the way, before they offshored everything. The Haas family offshored it, and the Lurie family. By the way, the current mayor of San Francisco is from that Levi Strauss family of the real Levi. Remember, I told you the foundations of the American clothing industry are Jewish, mostly from immigrants from Germany who brought in the old world craftsmanship, and they were familiar with tailoring processes. And they would work cheap, especially the production workers. That's San Francisco. So they, in the shadow of Levi Strauss, these people came up with a company. It's called Tellison. I'm not getting any money for this. I didn't get a deal on this. I don't know these people. I'm not shilling for them. All right. It's called Tellison. It says here, made in USA. This is called selvage. I'll get into it in a moment. But this fabric is made in America. The fabric itself is made, and the garment itself is made in the United States. So I bought this piece. I've also bought pieces, and I wear it around town. I wear it. This is like, when it gets cooler or in the winter, I'll wear this around. And it's very well constructed. Made in the U.S. I assume it's probably made mostly immigrant laborers from Latin America, Mexican, Guatemalan. And it's got all the different features, the rivets, and stitching. But importantly, it has the selvage self hem here. It goes back to the earlier days of denim, or what we call Levi's construction, which, by the way, hearkening back to Hayden Pondicherry in South Carolina, and the old abandoned dead textile mills of the South, of the Deep South. This is where they got it. This is their source. There's one or two mills, textile mills, still in existence down there, and they're gearing up for the demand, the huge global demand in this type of garments, because we Americans are sick and tired of the shitification of our society, our culture, our politics, and our people and our bodies and our economy. Shitification is no longer fashionable. We're tired of Larry Fink. We're tired of BlackRock. We're tired of State Street. We're tired of Blackstone buying up every single mom and pop store, restaurant, retailer, musical instrument company, and then turning it into a piece of crap. Right? Because there's always people waiting in the wings who are going to say, well, we're going to occupy this niche that's being created by all the vultures of Wall Street who call themselves venture capitalists, vulture capitalists. Now they call themselves private equity because vulture capitalism became a dirty word. Okay, so where did this happen? Right. The descendants of the Jewish rag trade people, that's what they were referred to disparagingly. When you talked about the rag trade, it was synonymous with Jewishness, just like the movie business, Jewish. Just like Wall Street, Jewish. It has an ethnic dimension, just like WASP. Once, there were certain WASP business, the insurance business, for example, automobile executive, that's strictly for WASP people. It's different, slightly different now. So you have people like Ralph Lipschitz, who went to work at a retail, which is the embodiment of the WASP fashion aesthetic. It's called Brooks Brothers, and they didn't want to hear his ideas. He had, he's a product of the 60s, the late 50s, 60s. He's a product of his time, but he knew garments. He was from the background. His name was Little Ralphie Lipschitz. And he said, you know what? I'm an outsider to the WASP dream. I read the comic books. I went to the movies, the Westerns, and I saw all the hard-boiled detectives. Ironically, most of these movies and comic books were written by Jews, but they were all about these Anglo-Saxon, Viking, Nordic-type heroes, including Superman. You know the story about Siegel and Schuster, Superman, the Uberman, that kind of DC Comics. Right, or Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine was published by, it was actually his father, but the guy took it over, William Gaines. Gaines was not the family name, but they were lampooning a lot of mainstream WASP culture, saying, well, we're Jews and we're going to create this humor magazine. Dave Berg looks at him. I mean, I ate that stuff up. I grew up on it. All right. So I kind of understand. He's older than me, but I understand Ralph Lipschitz's world and why he wanted to create an alternate reality called Preppy, 1980s. So here he is, Ralph Lipschitz, and you'll recognize who I'm referring to. I'm trying to create the suspense here. Because he's wealthy, Jane Polly. He sold out. He sold out to the private equity companies. Little Ralphie Lipschitz. He still has a trace of the Bronx, or is it Brooklyn? I can't remember but yeah, he has that accent. Now I understand why they never let him speak. This is before the age of internet, when he was big. They would put him into print ads because he looked in the role, but he was selling a dream. He was selling a role. He was selling theater. He was selling the idea of wasphood. And it was a Jewish idea of assimilation too. And for a lot of yellows today, it is the ideal of what they think is their assimilation into the Ivy League world of power and prestige. right? That's and that would include the South Asians, like your Vivek Ramaswamy or J.D. Vance's wife. They've all followed this kind of trajectory in order to make themselves commodities or consumable, acceptable to the American public. Whether it works or not, I don't know. Because Ann Coulter told Vivek Swamy to his face, she says, I'm not going to vote for you for president of the United States because you're Indian. she just told him flat out. So they probably have a couple more steps to take before they reach the same level as their predecessors into the positions of power. All right. So now let's move into the Asian connection, the yellow connection, as where it began. John Milton, right? The history of denim in Japan. And we'll finish up there because we're kind of running out of time right now.
The world. But what is Japanese denim? That's actually a really difficult thing to answer because Japanese denim has meant different things at different times. Really, 3 wildly different things. So we'll start with phase 1 right after World War II in the 1950s. So the story of Japanese denim actually starts with American denim, sourced from American soldiers post-war. At the time, jeans were a new radical clothing item. They called them G-pant, which is GI pants. These pants were used as barter trade in several seedy transactions, and they ended up in the American district, Ameyoko, Americatown. And these pants are not just pants, they carried a certain cultural identity with them. They offered a bit of psychological escape. The laid-back aura of 1950s America was in stark contrast to what was happening in Japan at the time. A very structured, highly codified social order with lots of rules and lots of history. And those energies, that like symbolism, means that American jeans becomes the uniform for a lot of counter-cultural movements in Japan. Like if you were a Marxist student, if you were an anti-Vietnam War protester, if you were part of the Japanese hippie movement, which is highly influenced from America, all of these counter-cultural movements use American jeans as part of their uniform. And it's no surprise that if you're a young person looking for exciting new ideas, looking for your identity, these things are very appealing. So eventually demand for American jeans outstripped supply. It was not enough that American GIs gave pants, it was not enough to get secondhand clothes from America. Japan needed to start making its own jeans. So fabric was sourced from Cone Mills, which is the Levi's supplier, and then cut and sewn in Japan. And that started the oldest Japanese denim brands like Edwin, like Big John. So significantly, Japan starts making its own fabric modeled after the Levi's fabric. So our first phase ends with Japanese fabric and a Japanese cut and sew, and that produces the first true Japanese denim product. And that is purely created to keep up with demand for American jeans. So let's fast forward 25 years. Now we are in phase 2 in the mid-1980s. Jeans are now mainstream globally, both in the United States and Japan. And global demand for an affordable pair of denim jeans forces a global drop in quality. The indigo dye is worse, the yarn is worse, the fabric is worse. And the main narrative that this generation has to fight against is this creep of mass manufacturing. And this mass manufacturing drop in quality pushes people back towards secondhand clothing. And this turns into a particular rabid subculture by identifying 1950s and 1960s styles. And that has its own vocabulary looking for salvage IDs, hidden rivets, like specific Levi's tags. And by noticing these things, you associate that as a surrogate marker of quality. It becomes a very specific intellectual obsession. But classic American jeans, 1950 style, becomes very expensive, like too expensive. $1,000 becomes way too unaffordable for a young person to buy a quality pair of jeans. So the definition of Japanese denim has to change again. Like, how do we once again create a countercultural product to fight against this mass manufacturing idea? And this leads to 5 companies set up in Osaka, the Osaka 5, that are set up to recreate vintage or reproduction jeans. Denim, Studio d'Artisan, Evisu, Full Count, and Warehouse. They decide to rebuild 1950s, 1960s jeans from scratch. And in doing so, they create very Japanese innovations. They repurpose very narrow shuttle looms that were made for Japanese sailcloth, and they repurpose that towards making denim. They revive a very ancient indigo dyeing tradition, and that has been going on for centuries. And the craft of indigo dyeing kimonos are now indigo dyeing jeans. And they focus a lot of intellectual energy into replicating 1950s jeans almost exactly. And replication in Japanese craft is culturally a path to mastery. Like in Japan, you hear of these stories where these ancient shrines are rebuilt every 20 years. Like notably the Ise Grand Shrine, which is rebuilt from scratch every 20 years. And this renewal is driven by a concept called tokowaka, meaning eternal youth, eternal renewal. And it's about a deliberate act of replication to maintain the prestige of something and to pass down traditional building technology. And so replicating American genes becomes a very natural thing for them to do. And this is what you hear about. Japan ends up being the custodian of American gene, American denim heritage. If you want to read about this, there's a great book called Hamamoto, which is by W. David Marks. And a lot of the history, a lot of the content of this video is taken directly from that book. And now we start phase 3. We fast forward again 15 years to current day, 2025. And what is happening now? Well, phase 3 begins with a tragedy. This exciting punk rock subculture that was made to fight against mass market manufacturing has become mass market manufacturing. Selvage is now mainstream. Even global chains will make jeans made from vintage shuttle loom fabric machines. But they find ways to make the jeans affordable. The yarn is not the same quality. Like the components that make up quality no longer mean much. The question that this generation is asking is, what is authentic? Like, what is punk rock in 2025? How do you rebel against an identity that you created? How do you rebel against yourself? And it looks something like this. Like, Japanese brands are innovating, and they're not looking back just to 1950s, but they're looking back to centuries of Japanese craft. And they're integrating the entire timeline into a modern pair of jeans. Momotaro, which is a very prominent Japanese denim company, their flagship product isn't a 1950s reproduction anymore. It is a pair of jeans made from cotton and Japanese silk. And that
Okay, did you get that? It's very important to understand the default understanding of what is coming out of other countries like Japan is, oh, they're just copying what's going on in America. No, they started with something that resembles American preppy style, and I'm including jeans in that. It's more like khaki was the uniform of the preppies of the post-war era, at least. But Levi's jeans have become part of the preppy wardrobe, I would imagine. But don't make that mistake of thinking, well, they're just repeating and copying. This is a common canard that's applied to especially the manufacturing processes of Japan, first of all, and then Korea got that, and then China was stigmatized by that. But the difference is that they're advancing the craft. They're not only restoring it, curating it, preserving it, but they're taking it further. Okay, that's the important part. And it's really up to Americans to decide here whether they want to overcome their own limited understanding of what these styles mean. And it's more than the style, their substance, what they mean, and how to take advantage of these different transformations taking part in the global economy and the trade and fashion. I mean, look at Lipschitz decided to market a dream, and the clothes are crap. Even Lacoste is crap. And it comes to mind that when I first started seeing these manufacturing outlets cropping up all over, I don't know if you have them where you live, but they're all over where I am. They're usually close to a freeway where you can just go to one of these, a Coach store. They used to be quality brands. It could be Chaps, could be Ralph Lauren, but it's just crap. They're a second level, third tier type junk with a label on it. That's why Ralph Lauren and his second wife were able to live so nicely in this ranch, living this fantasy of being a rancher. All right. Not saying that you need to do that, but I'm just saying that there's still a space, there's still a room for good old-fashioned American and Asian quality. Japan also has this concept called kaizen. That's continual improvement, just slight improvement of the previous iteration, not just preservation, but improvement, whether it's an electronic piece of gear or an artifact, a ceramic, could be knife making. Now, the good news is that ethic is coming. It was always part of American craftsmanship, but it's returning in a large, discernible presence, right? And I'm seeing it through magazines, not just mass market magazines, but also kind of feeling the terrain around. It's reasserting itself because people are tired of shitification. We're tired of eating shit. We're tired of wearing shit. We're tired of learning shit in the schools. We're tired of listening to bullshit on YouTube by a bunch of fakers who are retooled comedians, right? We want to encounter the real, and that's going to happen. And also, we're tired of the enshittification of the political process. But it's on us to make sure that that reality returns to us, and it starts in very minor ways. Right? I try to do it through the type of clothes I wear, what I eat, what I surround myself, who I talk to, where I appear, who I teach, what I read. You have choices. And you can also become a creator, a producer within this new quality economy that we're seeing happening. I'm seeing that happening. All right. It's not something I'm imagining. I'm seeing it empirically that it's happening right now. And I'll leave us with a couple of videos to underscore my argument here. First of all, let's talk about the enshittification process. And here's a video that underscores my comment about the scourge, the bane, the poison of Bain Capital. All right. The private equity company. So they used to be called vulture or venture capitalism. Here's a piece. These people know what's happening.
Weekends with Yankee. First stop this week is the island of Nantucket, off the coast of Massachusetts.
I'm sorry, I'm missing that video. This is that was about one of the primary playgrounds of the rich and famous WASP/Jewish establishment of America circa 2026. Here's the piece that talks about heritage brands that have gone down the crapper. And it's a call to arms so far as we, the people, in restoring the republic.
Alan Edmonds, Park Avenue Oxfords cost $399 in 1995. They were Goodyear welted, made in Port Washington, Wisconsin, in a factory that had been running since 1922. They could be resold 5, 6, 7 times. A pair of Alan Edmonds Park Avenue Oxfords cost $445 today. The factory in Port Washington still exists. Most of the leather no longer comes through it. 7 heritage brands you grew up trusting were sold to private equity in the last 15 years. The factories went quiet. The materials got cheaper. The prices went up. 5 brands refused the offer. They are still building the way they did in 1962, in 1932, in 1912. Same brand names on the labels. Opposite. Reality on the inside. Starting with a brand that once promised to outlive its customers, then quietly outsourced everything that made the promise true. Before we start the list, you need to understand what private equity actually does to a clothing brand. A private equity firm buys a heritage company. They borrow most of the money to do it. That debt is loaded onto the company itself. The company now has to pay interest before it pays anything else. To pay the interest, the firm cuts costs. They start with the most expensive line items. The most expensive line items in a heritage brand are the factory and the people in it. So they sell the factory. They sign a licensing deal with a contract manufacturer in Asia. They keep the logo, the catalog, the advertising budget, and the lawyers. Everything that made the brand a heritage brand goes onto a forklift. 3 to 7 years later, the firm sells the brand to another firm or takes it public. The new owner inherits the licensing deal. The licensing deal is now the brand. The brand name travels. The quality control does not. 5 brands on this list refused that deal. Everyone is still privately or family owned. Everyone still operates the same factory it operated decades ago. And every one of them is the answer to the 7 brands you are about to see. In 12th place, Fry. Fry started in Marlborough, Massachusetts in 1863. They made boots for Union Army officers. They made boots for the men who walked across the country in the 1970s. The Fry harness boot is in the Smithsonian. In 2019, Authentic Brands Group acquired Fry. Authentic Brands Group does not make anything.
And you can imagine what happened to the quality of Fry boots. They became pieces of crap. And I have some of the old original US made Fry boots. Man, they were some of the best boots I've ever had. They're around here somewhere. The problem is I outgrew them. I was still growing for some reason, but they were really nicely made. So while we're on the topic of shoes, let me just tell you my story, at least in part. I won't bore the people who don't want to hear about the yellow man. But here is this is part of my Fry, not Fry, but Alan Edmonds. It's mentioned here in these documentaries. It's one of the last remaining U.S.-made shoes companies here, and it's an endangered species. I'm sure the VC people or the so-called private equity companies are still circling it, trying to lend it money, and they want to hollow it out and buy it, and then they can flip it 5 years later, and they'll make all their crap over in Indonesia. Right, but here's from my collection. They packed the Alan Edmonds shoes. I don't know about now. I haven't bought them lately, but in a 100% cotton flannel keeper here with a little, and I didn't buy it for this reason, but this is what you put your shoes in when you travel or when you're going on away for a while, right? And they have a little drawstring. But this is one of their classic styles. I haven't even worn it yet. Again, you notice the moccasin construction here goes all the way down through, and this is genuine leather. They have a hard rubber made in USA midsole and heel, but the rest of it is leather. It's all leather inside, lined, and this is all calfskin. The uppers, as it's called, it's all calfskin. Right. I got this a number of years ago because I knew the prices were going to go up, because I was already seeing the decline, the enshittification of everything that were in our world. So I said, I better stock up on everything I value and hold on to it. So I got these from maybe $200. These shoes are going for like $500 now, and they're not the same quality. Alan Edmonds still, as far as I remember, still makes a pretty good shoe, but it's not the same as it was originally. And it's got a little cute bow here. Some people think it's kind of gay, but it's kind of like it's a little semi-casual, not really formal. And Alan Edmonds, right? It's little touches like this, and it's got the Alan Edmonds logo on the top here. Here's the mate for it. And I have about a half a dozen of these that I have stockpiled. I haven't even worn them yet, because if I go to a funeral or a wedding, I'm going to have a brand new pair of shoes to rock. None of these worn. I have all kinds of worn Alan Edmonds for my everyday wear. I used to wear these to school. Okay, this is part of my university uniform. All American tailored clothes, made in America, down to my jacket, my coat, my sports coat, sourced in America. Because I use it as a teaching, because most of the students in there were from Asia, and they were younger, so they were growing up into an enshittified culture and society. They had no perspective, so I had to model for them what they should aspire to so far as quality in America and in their own lives, including education. Right? There was always a pedagogical purpose for me doing this type of work. It was not just simply from my vanity and egoism and my aspirations, my dreams. of joining George Lipschitz out in the ranch someplace. But here's the box. Alan Edmonds, an Americana collection. I just pulled this out of the closet, hoping that the rest of them wouldn't fall on my head, just so that I can share them with you today, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the bag, Alan Edmonds. This is more of a business shoe. It's still kind of casual because it has sort of the penny loafer detail right here. You probably can't see it, but this is 100% calf. This is all calf inside. It's got a full leather sole and a composite hard rubber made in the U.S. All hand lasted, right through here. These are all handmade. These are handmade shoes. These cost me probably about $250, $300. Today they're going to cost you like $500 because I had the foresight to stockpile them. I'll probably never wear them. I might sell them on eBay for $500. I'll get that money too, because like I told you, people are looking for these types of treasures, these types of quality. Speaking of wardrobe, see, I showed you my shoe. This is very preppy. This is Harris tweed. This is part of my uniform at the university. Most of the professors I work with dress like shit. They were in shitified. They wore cheap Chinese-made clothes. They wore brown scuffed shoes. Piece of guy they had no self-respect, no pride in their appearance, and they're teaching students who are going to be ruling the world or trying to. It's not a very good example. So I wanted to be that. I wanted to live that. And people, you can imagine, I got the hate. I got haters, mostly from my colleagues. Said I've even had students telling me, you dress too well for a professor. And I said, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you expect me to dress like? A little pauper like you? Get the hell out of my office. You don't talk to me like that. So, and they don't get it. And after a while, I started making a habit explaining semiotically what the message was to them, the hidden, unspoken message of what the educational process was meant to convey, down to what I wore into the classroom. And of course, my colleagues hated it because they had zero conscience. You know, they would come to school wearing wrinkled shirts or sometimes T-shirts. And these are the women. The dykey ones were the worst offenders because there was some sort of like a political state. Well, we were the proletariat or some, and usually they were from privileged families. They would wear like ugly mustard stained T-shirts that were gray from being so old. All right, and they would look down on me. that's the area. So this is Harris tweed. It has the mark, and it's 100% wool, hand woven. It says there, this comes the fabric comes from Scotland or the Hebrides, right? I think it's manufactured in the U.S. and it's Hardwick clothing, American. You can find. You have to search for it, and you'll pay a little bit more. But this type of garment will last you forever. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance, and it's a classic. And it sends out a very strong signal of who you are as an American. And it's not just a simple nationalistic buy American spiel here. I'm saying that this is what the society and culture used to be and will be again, if I have anything to say about it, because other parts of the world do recognize it. And in the vacuum that the private equity companies manufactured, people in other countries said, well, we're going to take this craft, this sensibility, and we're going to take it further. We're going to advance it. So let's take a look at an example of this.
Where cities in this world places that make and sell sublime boots and shoes, but it's quite possible that none can match Tokyo. My name's Ben Robinson, founder of Stitchdown, and to be honest, I can't remember a time when I didn't have a deep connection with what was on my feet. Today, I'm lucky enough to spend my life learning from craftspeople who make some of the world's finest handmade boots and shoes. Every day, I get to deepen my understanding of the skill and artistry and toil it takes to make something exceptional, which this time has led me to Tokyo to visit factories, stores, and workshops for 3 days straight and learn as much as possible along the way. This is Soul Searching.
Hey, I'm Ben from Stitchdown, and we're back for day 2 of boot shopping in Tokyo. Yesterday, we were all over Asakusa, an incredible epicenter of boots and shoes in Tokyo. Today, we're going to be moving all around the city to keep figuring out why, in my estimation, Tokyo is the greatest quality footwear city in the world. There's no better place to start than attractions. In Harajuku, the brand started by Tomo Nishizaki in 2006. He was only 23 years old. Let's go in.
Hi.
Thank you for having me. Oh man.
This place is so cool.
We got boots.
Boots.
All right, so attractions, I mean, big on engineers. Engineer boots, you love them. One of the main facets of the brand. I mean, these are really good. This is the 329?
Yes. Okay. 329.
This is the 329 Engineer, which is fabulous. Where do you get the inspiration for this? You love rockabilly.
Rockabilly, yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about that and why you love it and how it kind of flows into the boots?
まず小さい時に家族がみんな音楽が好きで楽器をやってて、父親も母親も。で、兄貴がロカビリーのバンドをやってて。で、小学生の時にアメリカの50年代をテーマにした映画をよく日本ではテレビでやってたんですよ。で、それで母親にアメリカの古い音楽のコンピレーションを買ってもらって、その音楽を聴いてたらロカビリーのバンドをやってた兄貴にロカビリーが好きならこれを聴けって言われて出されたのがジョニー・バーネット・トリオっていうハードコアなロカビリーがあって、それに特に影響を受けました。
And in Harajuku, there still is a rockabilly scene. Yes?
なんかちょっとニュアンスが難しいんですけど、そう日本独自のロックンロール文化とその本当オリジナルの 50s 50年代のロカビリーと、その後リバイバルのロカビリーでちょっとずつスタイルとかジャンルが違うんですよね。自分が地元から東京に出てきた時は原宿に全てのカルチャーが集まってて、そうロカビリーロッキンもいればパンクスもいて、で古着を好きな人もいればスケーターもいて、世界中のストリートカルチャー音楽カルチャーみたいなのがギュッと詰め込んでる街っていうのが原宿でした。
It's so cool, man. I love it. And you're continuing it. You're driving it. I'd love to try on some engineers, but we got to talk about these ropers first.
Roper?
These things. Never seen a boot like this before. Like the texture on this print, on the leather, these little D-rings. I mean, these things are so cool. Where did this idea come from for ropers that look like this?
もともとこれはやっぱりヴィンテージの古い40年代50年代の洋服とかシューズとかそういうのから影響を受けた時に本当にこの40年代50年代にしかないデザインでこのローパーブーツっていうのがあって、カウボーイブーツでもウエスタンブーツでもなくてエンジニアブーツでもなくて、どちらかというとファッションブーツとしてあって、やっぱこれがこのロカビリーのなんかアイコン的なブーツだったんですよね。
Really cool. Can we go try on some engineers?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Every great Japanese footwear brand is wildly full of its own unique flavor. While I definitely saw overarching themes in terms of styles and a relentless dedication to quality, when you peer closer, what one brand creates is often totally distinct from the rest. Each speaks so loudly to different Japanese subcultures, and in some ways, Attractions pushes their core identity even further than the rest.
パイオニアの特徴はこのサッチンに対してホースバット1枚で間をスライスしたところに薄い芯材を入れてます。
Engineer boots, distinguished by their tall height and single strap and buckle, are an American icon that Japanese bootmakers have lovingly adopted. Driven by endless research into vintage engineer boot patterns, the pieces of leather that are stitched together to create a finished boot upper, along with heel shape, shoe lasts, and every other detail, right down to the outsoles.
The built buck soles
オリジナルソール
will not slip.
今年から使い始めているオリジナルのビルトバックソールです
And when you say original, are these the soles are actually vintage or the design is recreated?
これは当時あったじゃないかっていうようなデザインをオリジナルで作ってますあとはやっぱりこうエンジニアのソールなんで、この内容ゴムの内容も何を混ぜて受かったかそういうのも大事なんでコードとこの硬さとかあとは耐油性その辺もちゃんとこだわって設定してるんですごくいいソールができたと思ってます
So is there anything else that I should know about these engineers?
うち世界的にも珍しいのがエンジニアブーツをこれだけたくさんのモデル出してるっていうところはなかなかないと思うんですけどそのラストが今3種類あってそれによって工場も分けててその工場の特性も生かした作り方をしてるのはうちのブーツの特徴でもありますやっぱりこのブーツのメーカーとドレスのメーカーでアッパーのステッチングとかは全然やっぱりまず違うアッパーステッチドレスファクトリーブーツファクトリーディファインステッチ、あとはブーツエンジニアブーツ特にシャフトの立ち上がりとソールのこの形状っていうのはすごく大事だなとは思ってますあとはこのソールの削り方も見てもらうとこういうハス型台形にこっちを削ってるのが分かると思うんですよねこれはウェルトに対してウェルトは少しこう斜めに入ってるんでウェルトに対して直角に削ると基本的に靴ってハス型になるんでこれはブーツのすごく大事な部分あとはヒールの削り方もここがえぐれてストレートに落ちるこれが結構大事でこれは意外とエンジニアブーツでやってるところがなくてここを削った後にまっすぐ下ろさないとここがただえぐれて戻っちゃうってこれはどちらかって言ったらもうちょっと古い形ではあるんですけど50年代のエンジニアっていうのは基本的にえぐれてまっすぐ落ちてるんでここは削り方も普通の削り方ではできないです
Thank you so much, Tomo.
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful visit. Boots are incredible. Thank you for everything. All right, that was attractions. The boots are incredible. Tomo is the man. We got to go to Red Wing Aoyama next. We'll see you there.
My first pair of truly great boots were Red Wing Iron Rangers. My second pair of truly great boots were Red Wing Iron Rangers. We still got them. Red Wing is in many ways the American boot brand worldwide, and 2024 is the 10th anniversary of their fabulous Tokyo shop in Aoyama, where I headed to meet Yuki Kobayashi, who heads Red Wing Heritage's always boundary-pushing Asia division.
The classic. I mean, this is in some ways where it all started for Red Wing. It's this boot right here.
We have to display the worn shoes because these are so much cooler than the new shoes.
We're big on engineers, engineer boots.
Well, we will conclude on the Red Wing because guess what? You can buy them here in the U.S. still. Most of them are still USA made. And yes, indeed, I do have my Red Wings. I have engineer boots. And also more of the low-cut moccasin style or semi-mock. And they're not more expensive than because the imports now are coming up in price. And the quality is nowhere near what the American Red Wing shoes are. So, and they also have Lady Red Wing shoes. They were originally just for men, working men, right? People, service people, postal workers, you name it. Excuse me. I'm running out of steam here. So that's the rundown on the Preppy iterations of culture of WASP, and perhaps some suggestions on how we're going to recover that tradition. I think it's within our grasp. So go out there and do it. Until then, we'll see you next Sunday, God willing. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Bye.